So this is a fan that I bought my mother-in-law, over 5 years ago, maybe 6-7 years ago. And I just got through tearing it apart to clean it and to oil it because it quit spinning. And what it appears to be is the bearings in the motor. As you can see, I've already taken the motor out and apart. The bearings just seized up from either going dry and or all the lint that was all over the place, which I've cleaned a bunch of this up. Still got to clean the fan up, but you can see how the lint just got everywhere. So it worked its way into the motor, into the bearings, and I need to basically take the motor apart and put some new oil in and lube it up and see if I can't get it to free up again. So this video will be a reverse video of me starting with it disassembled, oiling it with oil like this. I'm just going to put a little bit of oil around that bearing there and work it in, and I'll be putting it back together. Alright, so my main problem seems to be that this armature was seized inside this bushing here, and it has some wear from where it was dry. So all I can really do is just oil it up real well and hope that it loosens up. But I put some oil in here. I was able to pull it out physically, just physically pull it, brutally force it out of the hole, just pull it as hard as I could basically, and got it to where I got enough room to put a drop of oil in there, and I put a drop and worked it, and then eventually I was able to pull this out, but it was really stuck in there. So that seems to be the problem. That armature was stuck in the back half of the motor. So I'm going to go ahead and oil that up real good, maybe put a little grease. I have to make a decision on that. And as you can see, the field coils here have a lot of lint and debris in there, so I need to clean all that out before I put it back together. Alright, so I've cleaned off the shaft with a towel, and I put quite a bit of oil in there. I'm not putting grease, I'm just putting oil, but it's motor oil for this specifically, a little bit thicker actually, and now you can see it spins pretty easy. So I think that's going to solve the problem. I just need to clean it up some more and resume putting the motor back together. But that's the first step. Get that apart and get it oil and make sure that thing spins really nicely. And look at that, it's doing pretty good. Alright, so I've got the motor back together here. Spins pretty good. It's going to be just fine, I believe. I just wanted to comment that if you have a fan like this and you can spin the fan blades and it spins freely, but the motor doesn't want to turn, doesn't want to run, you may have to replace this capacitor here. It's just one screw holding it in, and it's got two wires. What I would be inclined to do in that case is just cut those wires as close to the capacitor as I could, strip them, and then solder the new one on, and just, you know, insulate the two wires so that they won't short together or to the motor. And but in this case, it's not that. I could feel that the motor wanted to turn, it's just that it couldn't because the shaft was seized. Okay, so I just took a water hose to these housing pieces and the fan, and got them cleaned up pretty good. So I'll dry them off, or I'll just let this 100-degree heat I'm standing in dry them off, one of the two. Once it's dried adequately, I'll put it back together. Alright, I'm about to start putting this back together. I just wanted to comment on this motor. To take it apart, it's just these four bolts, screws, whatever, that go all the way through. As you can see, it goes all the way through to the bottom. You remove those four, and then the two outer pieces, the two housing pieces, separate from the core. And I didn't mention that when I had it apart. Also, this cap is only being held by one screw. Alright, so the first thing we're going to want to do is put this fan on the motor before we mount it into the to the fan housing pieces. And as you can see, it's got a notched key built in onto the plastic here and also onto the motor. So that will just slip on something like this. Not really showing it, am I? So there, so we're on. There's no set key or anything, it's just pressure mount, just pressure push on, compression. So the power cord has to be fed through this hole here, and there's a slot that the power cord fits into. Not really showing it well here, but yeah, come on. Not enough room to work. Okay, so you can see that the power cord goes into that slot, and there's a little keeper on the back side to keep it from being pulled out. So that has to be done first. Then this piece here that the switch mounts onto this slot here, right here, has to line up with the power cord like so. And then there's 3 tabs that just snap into the housing. Hard to do this with one hand, sorry. And is it gonna go? Here we go. There. So now that's in. So now the next thing to do is the switch has little keepers that fit into this slot. So let me put that in and I'll be back. Disregard what I said about putting the fan on first. Don't do that because you kind of need that off to be able to mount the motor now to the housing. There's 2 screws that hold it. After you get the switch in there, then 2 screws hold the motor into these 2 holes, these 2 screw holes on the housing. Now that we've got the motor mounted in, everything's lining up nicely on the housing. Things are plugging into holes and stuff from the motor into the housing. We can now put the fan blades back on. There we go. And as you can see, it spins pretty good. That should run just fine now. Next, I'll put the outer housing and the base back on. And back halves of the fan housing are only held together by 4 screws, only 4 screws. Put those in, line up the holes, snug them up, don't over tighten them. Last thing to do as far as the housing goes is install this handle cover. And it goes right here, it's held on by 2 screws. Basically just snaps on. Something like that, and then there's 2 screw holes that take small screws. The fan itself is back together. It should run when plugged in. The last thing we need to do is put that fan back into its base. It's got a swivel, kind of a vertical swivel thing that does like this. It's held on by 2 large plastic cap nut type things. This thing is all back together. Moment of truth. Let's plug it in, see if it's going to work or if it's going to blow up or catch on fire or whatever. So I don't really have a way to show you that I'm plugging this in. Got it plugged in. So let's turn it. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that's got good power. It's a 3-speed. So there's low, medium, high. Not seeing any smoke, not seeing any sparks. Here's the front of it. I didn't mention it prior, but this is a wind machine. I don't know if that's a label or a brand name, not sure, but wind machine. And it is blowing quite nicely, and I'm going to be sleeping comfortable tonight. That's the end of the video. Thanks for watching.